February 18th, 1978. 2:43 a.m. National Security Agency Headquarters, Fort Meade, Maryland. The corridor on the building's third floor smells of floor wax and stale coffee. Night shift analysts move between offices with the shuffling gait of the perpetually exhausted, their breath visible in the over-chilled air. The NSA keeps its computer rooms arctic. The IBM mainframes generate enough heat to warm a small town, but that cold bleeds into everything, seeps through walls, settles into bones. Tonight, it's 11 degrees outside. The heating system struggles. In room 3E144, a signals intelligence analyst named Robert Chen sits before a typewriter, transcribing intercepted Soviet embassy communications. Routine work. Tedious work. The kind of work that's ground down 3 marriages among his colleagues and left 2 others hospitalized with bleeding ulcers. Chen's been at it for 6 hours straight, his fingers cramped, his eyes burning from cigarette smoke and fluorescent glare. He wants to go home. He wants to sleep. The fire alarm erupts at 2:47 a.m. Not the building's regular alarm. That's a steady bell, familiar, almost comforting in its predictability. This is something different, a shrieking, oscillating wail that seems to come from the walls themselves, from the ceiling, from inside Chen's skull. He's on his feet before conscious thought kicks in, documents already being shoved into the desk safe, following the protocols drilled into every NSA employee from day one. Classified material never leaves the building, not even for a fire. The evacuation is chaos, dressed up as procedure. 200 analysts stumbling down stairwells, some still clutching coffee cups, others in their shirt sleeves despite the killing cold outside. The parking lot fills with confused, shivering bureaucrats. Someone says the alarm triggered in the new wing, near the satellite communications center. Someone else says it's a false alarm. Has to be. There's no smoke. Security personnel move through the crowd with clipboards, taking names, checking identification badges against photographs. At 3:12 a.m., a man in a navy parka turns and walks toward the tree line beyond the parking lot's edge. His badge identifies him as Martin Kovac, a technical translator in the Soviet Signals Division. 32 years old, security clearance, top secret/SCI. Born in Vienna, immigrated to the United States in 1968. Naturalized in 1973. Unremarkable file. No red flags. The kind of employee who does solid work without drawing attention, who eats lunch alone, who leaves precisely at 5:30 every evening. A security officer named Sandra Meeks watches him go. Something about his movement pattern bothers her. Too purposeful, too focused for a man supposedly fleeing a fire alarm. She checks her clipboard. Kovac's name isn't on the evacuation roster for the 3rd floor. According to the sign-in logs, he should be on the 2nd floor tonight, in the translation pool. Meeks keys her radio. This is post 7. I have a possible unauthorized movement. Male subject heading northwest from the main parking lot. Badge number 3847. By the time backup arrives, Kovac has vanished into the Maryland woods. The setup. The photograph sits in Martin Kovac's personnel file, paperclipped to his security clearance application from 1974. Black and white. Standard federal employee portrait. A thin face, pale eyes, hair combed with mathematical precision. He stares directly at the camera with an expression that could be confidence or could be contempt. It's difficult to tell. The photograph will be reproduced 10,000 times over the next 6 months, distributed to every law enforcement agency in North America, printed in newspapers, broadcast on television. But on this night in February 1978, it's just another face in just another file. The National Security Agency employs approximately 20,000 people in 1978, making it the largest intelligence organization in the United States. Its mission is signals intelligence, intercepting, decoding, and analyzing communications from foreign governments, particularly the Soviet Union. The work is technical, tedious, and absolutely critical to American national security. The NSA monitors Soviet military radio traffic, diplomatic cables, even telephone conversations between Kremlin officials and field operatives. Every day, NSA analysts process millions of intercepted communications, searching for patterns, for keywords, for anything that might indicate Soviet intentions. The agency operates under extreme security protocols. Every employee undergoes extensive background investigation. Every document is classified. Every room is monitored. The building itself sits behind multiple layers of fencing and armed guards. Visitors are rare. Journalists are never allowed inside. Even members of Congress have limited access. The NSA's unofficial motto, whispered in hallways and break rooms, is "never say anything." But security systems are designed by humans, and humans make assumptions. The primary assumption in 1978 is that Soviet intelligence services, the KGB and GRU, recruit spies before they enter sensitive positions. The screening process looks for connections to communist organizations, for travel to Eastern Bloc countries, for financial vulnerabilities that might make someone susceptible to blackmail. The theory is straightforward. Catch them before they get in, and you don't have to worry about them once they're inside. Martin Kovac passed every screening. His background was perfect, almost too perfect, though nobody noticed that at the time. Born in Vienna in 1946, the son of Czech refugees who fled the communist takeover in 1948. Raised in a family that despised the Soviet Union. Educated in Austrian schools, then at the University of Munich, where he studied Russian and Eastern European languages. Immigrated to the United States in 1968, sponsored by a distant uncle in Baltimore. Worked as a commercial translator for 3 years before applying to the NSA in 1973. His security clearance investigation took 7 months. FBI agents interviewed his former employers, his landlord, his neighbors. They examined his financial records, his medical history, his educational transcripts. They found nothing suspicious. Martin Kovac was exactly what he claimed to be. A talented linguist from an anti-communist family, eager to serve his adopted country. He joined the NSA in January 1974, assigned to the Soviet Signals Division as a technical translator. His job was to translate intercepted Russian communications, military radio traffic, diplomatic cables, technical documents. Not glamorous work, not particularly important work, or so it seemed. Junior translators like Kovac saw fragments of intelligence, isolated pieces that only made sense when combined with information from other sources. The NSA's compartmentalized structure meant that Kovac couldn't access the broader context of the communications he translated. That was deliberate. That was safe. Or it should have been. Between 1974 and 1978, the CIA and NSA run 16 major operations against Soviet targets. Operation Plum Bob monitors Soviet missile test telemetry from a listening post in Turkey. Operation Stonework intercepts communications from the Soviet Pacific Fleet. Operation Gamma Guppy tracks Soviet embassy personnel in Washington. Dozens of smaller operations run simultaneously. Dead drops, surveillance, signals interception, all the unglamorous machinery of Cold War espionage. Some of these operations succeed. Some fail. That's normal. Intelligence work is probability, not certainty. But starting in 1976, the failure rate begins to climb. Operations that should work don't. Sources dry up. Soviet targets change their communication patterns without explanation, as if they know they're being monitored. The CIA station in Moscow loses 3 assets in 6 months, all arrested and subsequently executed. The NSA's signals intelligence suddenly goes dark. The Soviets shift to new encryption systems, new radio frequencies, new protocols, all at once, as if following some coordinated plan. In the jargon of intelligence analysis, this is called hostile activity correlation. When multiple failures cluster together, it suggests a compromise. Someone is feeding information to the other side. The CIA's counterintelligence division launches an investigation in early 1977, codenamed Orange Peel. The working theory is that the KGB has penetrated either the CIA or NSA, possibly both. FBI counterintelligence joins the investigation. So does the NSA's Internal Security Office. They examine personnel files, financial records, travel patterns. They review every employee who had access to information about the compromised operations. The list runs to 300 names. Martin Kovac's name appears on page 47. His access level seems too low for the kind of damage being done. A junior translator wouldn't normally see operational details, wouldn't know about CIA sources in Moscow or NSA listening posts in Turkey. The investigators note his name, run a routine records check, find nothing unusual, and move on to more promising suspects. They're looking for someone senior, someone with broad access, someone motivated by ideology, or money, or revenge. They're looking in the wrong direction. The fire alarm at 2:47 a.m. on February 18, 1978, is triggered by a malfunction in the building's new smoke detection system. The system was installed 3 weeks earlier as part of a facility's upgrade. It's temperamental, oversensitive, prone to false alarms. This particular alarm is caused by condensation forming on a sensor in the satellite communications wing, where temperature differentials between computer rooms and hallways create constant moisture problems. The manufacturer will issue a recall 6 weeks later, but tonight, the system does exactly what it's designed to do. It screams, and everyone evacuates. Everyone except Martin Kovac, who takes this opportunity, perhaps the only opportunity he'll ever have, to walk away from the most sophisticated intelligence agency on Earth. The hidden truth. The dead drop is a Coca-Cola can. This detail will emerge later, during the forensic reconstruction of Martin Kovac's espionage activities. Soviet intelligence services prefer dead drops to face-to-face meetings. Less risk of surveillance, less chance of compromise. The technique is elegant in its simplicity. The agent leaves material at a predetermined location. Hours or days later, another operative retrieves it. No direct contact, no telephone calls, no meetings in public places where someone might notice, might remember, might testify later in court. Kovac's dead drop is located in Rock Creek Park, Washington, D.C., approximately 40 minutes from NSA headquarters. A hiking trail curves through thick woods near the Maryland border. At a specific spot, 37 paces past a distinctive oak tree, near where the trail bends toward a dry creek bed, there's a loose rock. Beneath that rock is a small cavity, just large enough for a Coca-Cola can. Kovac places the can there every third Tuesday, weather permitting. Inside the can are strips of microfilm, each strip containing photographs of classified documents. By Thursday, the can is always gone. The FBI will later calculate that Kovac made 63 drops between April 1975 and February 1978. 63 successful transfers of classified information to the KGB. 63 security breaches that should have been impossible. Understanding how this happened requires understanding what Kovac actually does at the NSA. His official title is Technical Translator, Grade GS-11, assigned to Section D of the Soviet Signals Division. His primary responsibility is translating technical documents, Soviet military manuals, scientific papers, engineering specifications. The work requires specialized knowledge of Russian technical vocabulary, familiarity with Soviet military terminology, and the ability to work quickly without sacrificing accuracy. But technical translation also requires context. A translator can't accurately render a Russian technical manual without understanding what the device actually does, how it fits into larger systems, what operational requirements it must meet. This means Kovac has access to more than just the documents he's translating. He has access to the NSA's technical libraries, its reference materials, its analytical reports that explain what the intercepted Soviet communications actually mean. He also has access to the building's internal document routing system. The NSA in 1978 is transitioning from paper to electronic record keeping, but the transition is incomplete. Documents still move through the building in physical form, folders passed from analyst to analyst, reports circulated for review, cables distributed to relevant departments. The routing is controlled by a pneumatic tube system installed in the 1960s, upgraded in 1973 with computer-controlled switching. Each tube station has a numerical designation. An analyst can send a document to any station by entering the correct code. Kovac discovers that certain routing codes provide access to document flows he shouldn't see. It's not a security failure exactly. It's an assumption failure. The system assumes that employees will only request documents relevant to their work. It assumes that a translator in Section D won't request cables from the Eastern Europe Analysis Division or reports from the Soviet Strategic Forces Section. But the system doesn't prevent such requests. It just delivers the documents. For the first 6 months, Kovac is cautious. He requests documents that plausibly relate to his translation work, technical manuals, engineering reports, scientific papers. He reads them, returns them through the routing system, and nobody notices. Gradually, he expands his requests. A report on Soviet missile telemetry, a cable from the CIA station in Vienna, an analytical assessment of Soviet submarine capabilities, small steps, careful steps, testing the boundaries. Nobody stops him. The documents he photographs represent a comprehensive picture of American intelligence operations against the Soviet Union. He copies CIA cables detailing operations in Eastern Europe. He photographs NSA reports on Soviet communications networks. He captures analytical assessments that reveal exactly what American intelligence knows about Soviet capabilities, and, more importantly, what methods are being used to collect that information. This is the crown jewels of intelligence, not just the information itself, but the sources and methods used to obtain it. The KGB uses this material systematically. When Kovac photographs a CIA cable about an operation in East Germany, the KGB arrests the agent involved. When he copies an NSA report on Soviet radio frequencies being monitored, the Soviets change their communication protocols. When he provides details about a listening post in Turkey, the Soviets adjust their missile test procedures to limit what can be intercepted. The damage is cumulative, progressive, devastating. Soviet intelligence runs Kovac through a handler codenamed Vladimir, though this isn't his real name. The FBI will never identify Vladimir with certainty, though they develop several theories. The handler works from the Soviet embassy in Washington, probably as a low-level diplomat or trade representative, someone unremarkable enough to move around the city without attracting surveillance. He services the dead drop in Rock Creek Park, retrieves the Coca-Cola cans, and delivers them to the embassy for secure transmission to Moscow. The KGB pays Kovac $2,000 per month, deposited in a Swiss bank account opened under a false name. Not a fortune, but enough to matter to a government employee earning $18,000 per year. The money is structured to avoid detection. Small deposits, irregular timing, routed through multiple intermediaries. Kovac never touches the Swiss account directly. The arrangement is that he'll have access after he retires, or if he's forced to flee, or if something goes wrong. Something goes wrong. The exact sequence of events on the night of February 18th, 1978, will be reconstructed from multiple sources: security camera footage, witness statements, forensic analysis of Kovac's work area. The picture that emerges is this. Kovac is working the night shift, as he does twice per week. He's alone in room 3E144, translating a Soviet technical manual about radar systems. At approximately 2:30 a.m., he uses the document routing system to request a classified cable from the CIA station in Moscow. The cable describes a new CIA operation targeting Soviet military intelligence officers. The cable arrives at 2:38 a.m. Kovac reads it, recognizes its value, and makes a decision. He needs to photograph this document before returning it, but photographing classified material requires privacy, time, and a camera small enough to conceal. Kovac has a Minix camera hidden in his briefcase, standard KGB issue, capable of photographing documents at close range without flash. He retrieves the camera, positions the cable on his desk, and begins photographing. At 2:47 a.m., the fire alarm triggers. Kovac faces an impossible choice. Protocol requires him to secure all classified materials in his desk safe and evacuate immediately. But the Minix camera is in his hand, and half the cable is still unphotographed. If he secures the cable now, he loses the intelligence. If he takes the cable with him, he's carrying classified material outside a secure facility, an automatic security violation, potentially a federal crime. He chooses a third option. He finishes photographing the cable, replaces it in its folder, secures the folder in his desk safe, and pockets the Minix camera. Then he evacuates with everyone else. In the parking lot, surrounded by hundreds of employees, Kovac realizes his mistake. The Minix is in his jacket pocket. If security conducts a search during the evacuation, and they sometimes do, particularly for employees from sensitive divisions, they'll find the camera. He can't explain why a translator needs a miniature camera designed for covert photography. He can't explain why he has it at 3 in the morning. He can't explain anything that won't end with his arrest. So he walks away. Security officer Sandra Meeks sees him leave. She notes his badge number, calls for backup, and initiates a search. But Fort Meade's grounds cover several hundred acres, most of it wooded. Finding one man in the dark in the cold is like finding a specific shadow. The search continues through the night without success. At 4:17 a.m., a Maryland State Police trooper notices a man walking along Maryland Route 32, approximately 3 miles from Fort Meade. The man is wearing a navy parka, no hat, no gloves. He's shivering. When the trooper pulls over to offer assistance, the man identifies himself as Martin Kovac and says his car broke down. The trooper offers him a ride. Kovac accepts. The trooper drops Kovac at a 24-hour diner near Baltimore. Kovac thanks him, enters the diner, orders coffee, and sits in a booth near the back. He knows what's happening at Fort Meade right now. They're checking the evacuation roster. They're comparing badge numbers to employee locations. They're realizing that Martin Kovac was in the wrong section of the building, that he left the facility grounds without authorization, that something is very wrong. At 6:30 a.m., Kovac uses the diner's payphone to call a number in Washington, D.C. The number connects to an answering service, a legitimate business that takes messages for subscribers. Kovac identifies himself with a prearranged code phrase and leaves a message. The package will be delayed. Then he hangs up. By 9 o'clock that morning, every law enforcement agency in Maryland is looking for him. The turning point. The Minix camera is the key to everything. FBI Special Agent David Reese arrives at Fort Meade at 7:45 a.m. on February 18th, carrying a briefcase full of counterintelligence files and a headache that feels like someone's driving nails through his temples. He's been working the Orange Peel investigation for 14 months. 14 months of chasing shadows, interviewing suspects who all seem innocent, following leads that go nowhere. The investigation has identified several possibilities, but no certainties. Several concerns, but no evidence. And now some translator nobody's ever heard of has walked away from NSA headquarters at 3 in the morning, and Reese knows with the certainty that comes from 2 decades of counterintelligence work, that this is the break they've been waiting for. Sandra Meeks briefs him in a conference room on the 3rd floor. She's been awake for 30 hours straight, running on coffee and nervous energy. She explains what she saw. Kovac moving purposefully toward the tree line, his body language all wrong, the way he didn't look back even once. She shows Reese the security logs. Kovac signed into the building at 7 p.m. on February 17th. He was assigned to Section D, second floor, but the desk safe in room 3E144, third floor, Section B, contains documents checked out to his name. He was somewhere he shouldn't be, Meeks says, doing something he shouldn't do. Reese examines Kovac's desk safe. Standard government issue, combination lock, fire-resistant steel. NSA regulations require employees to secure all classified materials before leaving their work area. Kovac followed that regulation. The safe contains 17 documents, all properly filed, all accounted for. Reese photographs each document, notes its classification level, its date, its origin. Routine material mostly. Technical translations. Reference guides. Nothing that would explain why a translator would risk his career and his freedom by fleeing in the middle of the night. Except one cable. CIA Moscow Station, dated February 14, 1978. Classified top secret, special compartmented information. The cable describes a planned operation to recruit a Soviet military intelligence officer during an upcoming diplomatic reception. It includes the officer's name, his vulnerabilities, the approach strategy, the promised compensation. Exactly the kind of information the KGB would kill to obtain. Why does a translator have access to this? Reese asks. Meeks shrugs. Document routing system. If you know the codes, you can request pretty much anything. And nobody monitors what's being requested? There are audit logs, but with 20,000 employees and millions of documents moving through the system every day. She doesn't finish the sentence. She doesn't need to. Reese calls his supervisor at FBI headquarters. Within 2 hours, a full counterintelligence task force is mobilized. Agents begin surveillance on Kovac's apartment in Baltimore, a modest one-bedroom in a building full of government employees. They obtain warrants to search the apartment, to monitor his telephone, to examine his financial records. They interview his neighbors, his coworkers, his landlord. They pull his complete NSA file, including his original security clearance investigation from 1973. The search of Kovac's apartment reveals the scope of his betrayal. Hidden in a locked filing cabinet are receipts for photographic supplies, developing chemicals, special film, mounting paper. A small darkroom is set up in the bathroom, with a makeshift enlarger rigged above the sink. The apartment's second bedroom contains hundreds of books about Soviet technology, Soviet military organization, Soviet scientific research. Some of these books are in Russian. Some are classified NSA reference materials that should never have left Fort Meade. But no Minix camera, no microfilm, no evidence of espionage itself, just the infrastructure that would support it. The financial investigation is more revealing. Kovac's bank accounts show regular deposits consistent with his NSA salary. But the banking records also reveal something unusual. Every month, Kovac withdraws $500 in cash. Not checks, not transfers, cash. When agents total these withdrawals over 4 years, they come to approximately $24,000, far more money than a frugal translator living alone should need. He's sending it somewhere, Reese tells his team, or paying someone, or stashing it. Find out where the money goes. But tracking cash is nearly impossible. Unlike checks or wire transfers, cash leaves no paper trail. Once Kovac withdrew the money from his bank account, it could go anywhere, to anyone, for any purpose. The FBI agents interview bank tellers, review surveillance camera footage from branches Kovac frequented, and find nothing useful. The money vanishes into the economic void. While the FBI searches for Kovac, the NSA's Internal Security Division conducts damage assessment. This is the nightmare scenario for any intelligence agency, calculating what the enemy now knows. A team of analysts begins reviewing every document Kovac accessed during his 4 years at the NSA. The document routing system maintains detailed logs. Who requested what, when, where the document came from, where it went afterward. The logs reveal Kovac's pattern of requests. The gradual expansion from legitimate translation work to intelligence gathering. The list of compromised documents runs to 300 pages. CIA operations in Eastern Europe. NSA signals intelligence on Soviet communications. Technical assessments of Soviet weapons systems. Personnel files of CIA officers working under diplomatic cover. Satellite imagery of Soviet military installations. Communications intercepts revealing Soviet knowledge of American nuclear strategy. Every document Kovac accessed represents a potential breach, a possible compromise, another piece of American intelligence now in Soviet hands. The damage assessment team calculates that Kovac had access to information affecting at least 47 active CIA operations. 16 of those operations have already failed or been compromised. The others are immediately suspended, pending security review. CIA officers working undercover in Soviet-controlled territories are recalled. Sources are warned. Operations are restructured. The cost, in money, in time, in intelligence capabilities, will eventually total hundreds of millions of dollars. But the cost in human lives is incalculable. 3 CIA assets in Moscow, arrested in 1976 and 1977, have already been executed. Another 4 are serving long sentences in Soviet labor camps. 2 agents in East Germany disappeared in early 1978, presumed arrested. An NSA analyst who worked as a liaison to CIA stations in Europe died in a car accident in Vienna in 1977, an accident that now looks suspiciously convenient for Soviet intelligence. The body count might be higher. Soviet intelligence services don't always announce their arrests. People simply disappear. As the damage assessment continues, the FBI manhunt intensifies. Kovac is now the subject of a nationwide alert. His photograph appears on television news broadcasts, in newspapers, on wanted posters distributed to every police department in America. Tips flood FBI offices. Kovac is seen in New York, in Los Angeles, in Miami, in Seattle. Every sighting is investigated. Every tip is false. Reese develops a theory. Kovac is trained, professional, careful. He wouldn't flee without a plan. Soviet intelligence certainly gave him escape protocols, places to hide, contacts who could provide new identity documents, routes out of the country. The KGB excels at exfiltration, at moving compromised agents from hostile territory to safety. They have safe houses, sympathizers, diplomatic channels. Kovac could be anywhere. But Reese also knows something about human psychology. Kovac is trained, yes, but he's also panicked. He left Fort Meade on impulse, carrying evidence of espionage in his pocket, with no time to prepare. He's improvising now, relying on backup plans he probably hoped never to use. And people who improvise make mistakes. The mistake comes on February 22nd, 4 days after Kovac's disappearance. A bank teller in Silver Spring, Maryland, recognizes a customer attempting to withdraw money from a savings account. The customer matches the description of Martin Kovac: thin build, pale eyes, precise manner. But he's not using Kovac's name. He presents identification for a David Kroll, complete with driver's license and social security card. The documents look legitimate, but the teller, who has seen Kovac's photograph on television every night for 4 days, hesitates. She excuses herself, walks to the bank manager's office, and calls the police. 15 minutes later, the bank is surrounded by FBI agents and local police. Kovac, still pretending to be David Kroll, is sitting in the lobby, reading a newspaper, waiting for his withdrawal. When agents enter, he looks up, sees the guns, and goes perfectly still. He doesn't run. He doesn't resist. He simply stands, places his hands behind his head, and waits to be arrested. In his jacket pocket, agents find the Minix camera. The revelation. The interrogation room at FBI headquarters is painted institutional beige, furnished with a metal table and 3 chairs bolted to the floor. Fluorescent lights hum overhead. A tape recorder sits on the table, its reels turning slowly. Martin Kovac sits in one chair, hands cuffed in front of him, wearing the same navy parka he wore 4 nights ago when he fled Fort Meade. He hasn't slept. He hasn't shaved. He smells of cigarette smoke and fear. David Reese sits across from him, a yellow legal pad open on the table. Next to Reese is a CIA counterintelligence officer named Patricia Grant, a woman in her 40s with steel gray hair and eyes that miss nothing. They've been at this for 6 hours, and Kovac hasn't said a word. "You understand the situation," Reese says. His voice is calm, almost gentle. "We have the camera. We have the documents from your safe. We have your financial records. We have enough evidence to send you to prison for the rest of your life." Kovac stares at the table. "But here's what I don't understand," Reese continues. "You're an intelligent man. You speak 5 languages. You could have had a successful career. Why throw all that away for the Soviets?" Still nothing. Patricia Grant leans forward. "The CIA has sources inside Soviet intelligence," she says. This is a bluff, though Kovac has no way to know that. "We know about Vladimir. We know about the dead drop in Rock Creek Park. We know about the Swiss bank account. The question is whether you cooperate with us or whether you let the KGB take all the credit for your work while you spend 40 years in a federal prison." For the first time, Kovac's expression changes. A flicker of something. Anger, maybe, or recognition. He looks at Grant, then at Reese. "I want a lawyer," he says. The trial of Martin Kovac begins in U.S. District Court in Baltimore on September 11, 1978. The proceeding is closed to the public due to classified material involved in the case. Only cleared personnel, attorneys, intelligence officials, court staff with security clearances are allowed inside the courtroom. The press waits in the hallway, interviewing anyone who emerges, trying to piece together what's happening behind closed doors. The prosecution's case is overwhelming. FBI agents testify about the evidence found in Kovac's apartment. The dark room, the photographic supplies, the classified materials. NSA officials detail the documents Kovac accessed through the routing system. Financial investigators trace the pattern of cash withdrawals. The Minix camera itself is entered into evidence, along with the undeveloped film still inside, which contains photographs of the CIA cable about the Moscow operation. Kovac's defense attorney, a public defender named Thomas Walsh, argues that his client acted under duress, that the KGB blackmailed him into cooperation, that he's a victim rather than a perpetrator. Walsh presents no evidence to support this claim, and under cross-examination, Kovac refuses to testify about his motivation or his contacts with Soviet intelligence. The jury deliberates for 4 hours. They return a verdict of guilty on all counts: espionage, unauthorized disclosure of classified information, conspiracy to defraud the United States. Judge Raymond Harrison sentences Kovac to 35 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. As U.S. Marshals lead him from the courtroom, Kovac speaks publicly for the first time since his arrest. "You don't understand," he says, looking directly at David Reese, who sits in the gallery. "None of you understand what's really happening." Reese will think about that statement for years afterward, wondering what Kovac meant. Was he suggesting there were other spies? Was he claiming his espionage was justified? Was he simply trying to maintain some dignity in the face of total defeat? The question remains unanswered. Kovac refuses all subsequent requests for interviews, all offers to cooperate in exchange for sentence reduction. He disappears into the federal prison system, a ghost of the Cold War. But the investigation continues. The damage assessment ultimately reveals that Kovac compromised 53 active CIA operations, resulted in the arrest or execution of 14 CIA assets, and provided Soviet intelligence with detailed information about American signals intelligence capabilities. The NSA implements new security protocols, including mandatory polygraph examinations for all employees with access to classified material and enhanced monitoring of document routing systems. The CIA restructures its operations in Eastern Europe, rebuilding networks that took decades to establish. The financial investigation leads to the Swiss bank account, which contains $87,000 deposited by Soviet intelligence. The account is frozen, and the money is seized by U.S. authorities. The KGB handler known as Vladimir is never conclusively identified, though FBI surveillance photographs from the period show several Soviet embassy personnel visiting Rock Creek Park during times consistent with servicing the dead drop. These individuals are eventually expelled from the United States for activities incompatible with diplomatic status, the polite fiction used when countries want to remove suspected intelligence officers without creating an international incident. In December 1978, Soviet Premier Leonid Brezhnev meets with his KGB chairman, Yuri Andropov, to discuss the implications of Kovac's arrest. The conversation is documented in Soviet archives declassified in 1994. Brezhnev expresses frustration that an agent who provided such valuable intelligence was lost due to what he calls incompetent tradecraft. Andropov defends the decision to equip Kovac with the Minix camera, arguing that photographic intelligence is more reliable than handwritten notes or memorized details. But he acknowledges that the camera became Kovac's downfall. If not for the fire alarm, if not for the panic of being caught with evidence in his pocket, Kovac might have continued spying indefinitely. The Americans were lucky, Andropov says in the transcript. They found him by accident, not through skill. Brezhnev's response is not recorded. The CIA's Moscow station eventually determines that the operation described in the cable Kovac, photographed on February 18th, the planned recruitment of a Soviet military intelligence officer, never took place. The target officer failed to attend the diplomatic reception where the approach was scheduled. Whether he was warned away by the KGB, or whether his absence was coincidental, remains unclear. But the CIA officer who wrote the cable, a station chief named Richard Hollis, is recalled to Washington and reassigned to a desk job. His career effectively ended by Kovac's espionage. "We lost 4 years of work," Hollis will later write in his memoir, published in 1989 after his retirement. 4 years of building relationships, establishing credibility, positioning assets. All gone because one translator decided to take pictures of documents he had no business reading. The Soviets knew everything. They knew our methods. They knew our sources. They knew our targets. After Kovac, we had to start over from zero. The NSA's internal review identifies 3 systemic failures that allowed Kovac's espionage. First, the document routing system lacked adequate access controls. Any employee who knew the routing codes could request documents outside their clearance level. Second, audit logs were reviewed infrequently, meaning Kovac's unusual pattern of document requests went unnoticed for years. Third, the security investigation that cleared Kovac in 1973 failed to adequately verify his background before he immigrated to the United States. This third failure is particularly disturbing. When FBI agents finally obtained records from Austrian authorities, they discovered discrepancies in Kovac's story. The family he claimed fled Czechoslovakia in 1948 did immigrate to Vienna, but their surname was Kovac's, not Kovac, and they had no son named Martin. The real Martin Kovac died in a car accident in Munich in 1967. The man who applied to the NSA in 1973 using Kovac's identity was someone else, someone trained by Soviet intelligence, someone inserted into the United States specifically to penetrate American intelligence agencies. His real name is never determined with certainty. Soviet archives from this period remain classified. Czech intelligence files are incomplete. The best theory, developed by CIA analysts reviewing defector testimony and fragmentary evidence, is that the spy calling himself Martin Kovac was actually Mikhail Kardos, a Hungarian-born intelligence officer recruited by the KGB in 1965, trained in languages and tradecraft, and given a sophisticated legend, a false identity complete with genuine documents and verifiable history. He was a false flag from the beginning, Patricia Grant testifies, before a closed session of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence in January 1979. Not a recruited agent, but a plant. The Soviets spent years building his cover, positioning him, waiting for the right moment to insert him into our intelligence apparatus. We got lucky that he panicked. If not for that fire alarm, we might never have caught him. The Senate Committee's final report, partially declassified in 2003, is scathing in its assessment of security failures at the NSA. The report recommends sweeping reforms, including mandatory counterintelligence training for all employees, regular security reviews of personnel with access to classified material, and the implementation of compartmented access systems that prevent employees from requesting documents outside their assigned areas. But the report also notes something else, something that becomes clear only in hindsight. Martin Kovac was just one spy. The damage he caused, while severe, represented only a fraction of Soviet intelligence operations against the United States during this period. Other spies remain undetected. Other operations continue uncompromised. The Cold War's intelligence battle isn't a series of isolated incidents, but a continuous chess game, with each side probing for weaknesses, exploiting opportunities, sacrificing pieces to gain advantage. Kovac is a pawn that got captured. The game continues. Lasting impact. The Minix camera sits in an evidence locker at FBI headquarters for 3 years after Kovac's conviction. In 1981, it's transferred to the National Cryptologic Museum, a small facility near Fort Meade, operated by the NSA to document the history of signals intelligence. The camera is displayed in a glass case alongside other espionage paraphernalia, one-time pads, cipher machines, concealment devices used by various spies throughout the Cold War. A small placard explains its significance. Minix camera used by Soviet agent Martin Kovac to photograph classified documents at NSA headquarters, 1975 to 1978. The camera's discovery led to Kovac's arrest and conviction for espionage. Visitors to the museum stand before the case, staring at an object no larger than a cigarette lighter, trying to understand how something so small could cause such enormous damage. Museum docents, many of them retired NSA employees, explain the camera's capabilities, how it could photograph documents in low light, how its special film captured fine details, how agents could process the film in makeshift darkrooms using ordinary photographic chemicals. The camera is remarkable, not for its complexity, but for its simplicity. Anyone could use it. Anyone could become a spy. But the real legacy of Martin Kovac isn't the camera. It's the transformation of American counterintelligence. The NSA implements new security measures in 1979, collectively known as the Kovac protocols. Every employee undergoes enhanced background investigation, including interviews with family members, review of travel patterns, and examination of financial records going back 5 years. Polygraph examinations become mandatory, administered annually for employees with top-secret clearances. The document routing system is completely redesigned, with access restrictions tied to specific job requirements rather than security clearance levels. An employee in Section D can no longer request documents from Section B unless their supervisor explicitly authorizes the request. Most significantly, the NSA establishes an Office of Counterintelligence, separate from internal security, focused exclusively on detecting insider threats. The office employs psychologists, data analysts, and investigators who monitor employee behavior patterns looking for indicators of espionage, unusual financial activity, suspicious document requests, unexplained absences, changes in lifestyle. The approach is controversial. Some employees complain about constant surveillance, about the atmosphere of suspicion, about the assumption that everyone is potentially guilty until proven innocent. But the approach works. Between 1979 and 1985, the Office of Counterintelligence identifies 7 NSA employees engaged in activities potentially compromising national security. 4 are prosecuted for espionage. 3 are quietly dismissed after investigation reveals no actual compromise, but serious security violations. None of these cases approach the scale of Kovac's espionage, but each represents a threat detected and neutralized before catastrophic damage occurred. The CIA implements similar measures. Personnel security reviews become more frequent and more intensive. Officers working under diplomatic cover receive additional training in recognizing hostile surveillance, detecting compromise, protecting sources and methods. The Moscow station, devastated by Kovac's revelations, is rebuilt with enhanced security protocols and more sophisticated compartmentalization. Operations that previously involved dozens of people aware of the complete picture are restructured so that no single individual, not even senior officers, knows every detail. This compartmentalization has costs. Operations become slower, more bureaucratic, harder to coordinate. But the trade-off is deemed necessary. As one CIA officer notes in a classified after-action report, "We can no longer trust that cleared personnel will remain trustworthy. We must design systems that contain damage even when trust is betrayed." The FBI, too, learns from Kovac. Counterintelligence investigations receive increased funding and personnel. Surveillance techniques are enhanced. The FBI establishes closer liaison relationships with NSA and CIA counterintelligence offices, sharing information about suspicious patterns, coordinating investigations, ensuring that one agency's blind spot doesn't become an enemy's opportunity. But perhaps the most lasting impact is psychological. Before Kovac, American intelligence agencies operated on the assumption that rigorous background investigation and security clearances were sufficient to ensure loyalty. After Kovac, that assumption collapses. The new reality is darker, more paranoid. Anyone might be a spy. The friendly translator in the next office. The analyst who stays late every night. The supervisor who asks slightly too many questions. Trust becomes provisional, conditional, always subject to verification. This atmosphere of suspicion has profound effects on morale. NSA employees report increased stress, anxiety, resentment at being constantly monitored. Recruitment becomes more difficult. Qualified candidates decline offers after learning about polygraph requirements and lifestyle investigations. Retention suffers as experienced personnel leave for private sector jobs that offer better pay and less scrutiny. The intelligence community struggles with a fundamental tension. Security requires monitoring, but monitoring undermines the trust and cooperation necessary for intelligence work to succeed. There's no perfect solution, only a constant balancing act between protecting secrets and enabling the collaboration needed to collect those secrets in the first place. Soviet intelligence learns its own lessons from Kovac's arrest. KGB training programs begin emphasizing compartmentalization and operational security. Agents are taught to separate their espionage activities from their personal lives more rigorously. Dead drops are serviced less frequently, but with more sophisticated surveillance detection. Communication methods become more elaborate, with multiple layers of cutouts and concealment. The KGB also becomes more cautious about equipping agents with physical evidence, like cameras. Later investigations reveal that Soviet intelligence shifts toward recruiting agents who have photographic memories and can pass information verbally, or who can recreate documents from memory rather than photographing originals. The risk of an agent being caught with incriminating evidence is too high. Better to sacrifice some precision in intelligence gathering than lose an entire operation because an agent panicked and got arrested with a camera in his pocket. Martin Kovac himself disappears into the federal prison system. He serves his sentence at the U.S. Penitentiary in Marion, Illinois, a high-security facility housing the most dangerous federal inmates. Prison records, later released under Freedom of Information Act requests, show that Kovac keeps to himself, speaks to few other inmates, spends most of his time reading. He requests books on history, languages, mathematics. He refuses all interview requests from journalists, historians, and intelligence officials. In 1994, after serving 16 years of his 35-year sentence, Kovac dies in prison. The official cause of death is listed as myocardial infarction, a heart attack. He's 57 years old. No family members claim his body. He's buried in a municipal cemetery near the prison, his grave marked with a simple stone bearing his name and dates, or at least the name he used. Whether Martin Kovac was really Mikhail Kardos, or whether that too was another layer of deception, remains uncertain. Soviet archives that might confirm his real identity remain classified. Hungarian intelligence files are incomplete. Czech records are ambiguous. The man himself took his secrets to the grave. In 1997, the CIA's history staff publishes a classified monograph titled The Kovac Compromise: Lessons in Counterintelligence. The document, partially declassified in 2015, analyzes Kovac's espionage from multiple perspectives: operational security, personnel vetting, damage assessment, counterintelligence response. The monograph's conclusion is sobering. Despite enhanced security measures implemented since 1978, no system can guarantee that a determined insider will not compromise classified information. The challenge is not to create perfect security, an impossible goal, but to detect compromise early enough to limit damage and protect ongoing operations. The document notes that several NSA employees had access to the same documents Kovac compromised, but only Kovac chose espionage. What distinguishes a loyal employee from a traitor isn't primarily opportunity, but motivation. Understanding that motivation, the psychological, financial, ideological factors that drive someone to betray their country, remains the central challenge of counterintelligence. Modern intelligence agencies still study the Kovac case. CIA officers in training analyze the decisions made by Soviet handlers, the tradecraft employed, the security failures that allowed the operation to succeed. NSA employees learn about the document, routing vulnerabilities Kovac exploited, and the technical controls implemented afterward. FBI counterintelligence agents study the investigation that led to Kovac's arrest, the breaks that made detection possible, the mistakes that nearly allowed him to escape. The fire alarm that triggered everything has become almost legendary within the intelligence community. Training materials sometimes refer to the Kovac scenario, an unexpected event that forces an agent to make a split-second decision, a decision that reveals what was hidden. Security protocols now include randomized facility checks, unannounced evacuations, surprise inspections designed to catch insider threats off guard. But no amount of protocol can eliminate human judgment, human error, human fear. At 2:47 a.m. on February 18th, 1978, Martin Kovac faced a choice: follow procedure and lose intelligence, or take a risk and save his operation. He chose risk. That choice ended his career, destroyed his freedom, and ultimately cost him his life. The question security professionals still ask is, how many others have made different choices? How many spies recognized the moment of crisis and made the safer decision, continuing their espionage without detection? The answer is unknowable, and that uncertainty haunts every counterintelligence officer who studies Kovac's case. Epilogue. The dead drop in Rock Creek Park exists unchanged. The hiking trail still curves through thick woods near the Maryland border. The distinctive oak tree still stands. Older now, its branches spreading wider. 37 paces past that tree, near where the trail bends toward a dry creek bed, there's still a loose rock. Beneath that rock is still a small cavity. No Coca-Cola can has appeared there since February 1978. Sometimes, on quiet afternoons, hikers pause near that spot without knowing why. Something about the location feels significant, though they can't articulate what. The woods are peaceful here. Sunlight filters through leaves. Birds call from hidden branches. Nothing suggests that this ordinary place was once a junction point between two superpowers. A location where American secrets flowed into Soviet hands, where the invisible war of intelligence and counterintelligence touched physical ground. The National Cryptologic Museum closes at 4 o'clock most days. Visitors filter out slowly, pausing to examine displays one last time before leaving. In the espionage section, people still gather around the glass case containing Martin Kovac's Minix camera. They read the placard. They take photographs. They move on to the next exhibit. But occasionally, someone stands there longer, staring at the small black camera, thinking about the documents it photographed, the operations it compromised, the lives it destroyed. They think about the fire alarm that triggered at exactly the wrong moment, about the panic that followed, about the choices made in darkness. They think about how small causes produce enormous effects, how random chance intersects with human decision, how history turns on moments nobody expects. The camera sits in its case, inert, silent, unremarkable, just a tool, just metal and glass and precision engineering. What made it dangerous wasn't its physical properties, but the human intention behind its use, the knowledge it captured, the betrayal it represented. Security experts sometimes use Kovac's case to illustrate a principle. The most sophisticated security systems can be undone by human factors. Technology can be compromised. Procedures can be circumvented. Clearances can be obtained through deception. But human motivation, the reason someone chooses loyalty or betrayal, cooperation or compromise, remains the fundamental variable that determines success or failure. Martin Kovac wasn't caught through brilliant counterintelligence or sophisticated surveillance. He was caught because a fire alarm malfunctioned, because he panicked, because a security officer noticed something wrong and followed her instincts. Remove any of those factors. If the alarm had triggered 5 minutes earlier or later, if Kovac had remained calm and followed procedure, if Sandra Meeks had been looking in a different direction, and the outcome changes completely. This is what keeps counterintelligence professionals awake at night. The knowledge that threats are detected through some combination of skill and luck, that systems designed to catch spies sometimes work, but sometimes fail, that the enemy is always adapting, always learning, always looking for new vulnerabilities to exploit. Somewhere in the archives of Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service, formerly the KGB's first chief directorate, there is presumably a file on the agent codenamed Martin or Kovac or whatever designation Soviet intelligence assigned him. That file contains his operational history, his intelligence reports, assessments of his value to Soviet interests. Perhaps it includes photographs of the documents he provided. Perhaps it analyzes the circumstances of his arrest. Perhaps it draws lessons for future operations. That file remains classified. The Russian government has never publicly acknowledged that Martin Kovac was a Soviet agent, never confirmed his real identity, never released documents about his recruitment or operations. The official position is silence, as it has been since 1978. But intelligence professionals on both sides know the truth. Martin Kovac was a Soviet spy who penetrated American intelligence, who caused enormous damage, who got caught because of bad timing and good luck. His story is remarkable, not because it's unique, but because it represents the pattern that repeats throughout intelligence history: recruitment, operation, compromise, damage assessment, reform. The the cycle continues. The game never ends. The loose rock in Rock Creek Park remains undisturbed. No one services that dead drop anymore. No one needs to. The operation it supported died 47 years ago when a fire alarm screamed through NSA headquarters at 2:47 in the morning, and a frightened man made a choice that sealed his fate. But somewhere, in some other location, another dead drop waits. Another agent makes their approach. Another secret changes hands. The Cold War ended, officially, when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. But the intelligence war continues, with different players, different methods, different stakes. The tools change, the technology evolves, the fundamental dynamic remains constant. Some people keep secrets, and other people work to steal them. Martin Kovac's Minix camera sits in its museum case, a reminder that in this shadow world of secrecy and espionage, the smallest objects can carry the largest consequences. A camera no bigger than a cigarette lighter. A fire alarm that sounded at the wrong moment. A security officer who noticed something strange. A spy who panicked and ran. That's all it took to unravel 4 years of espionage, to expose one of the most damaging security breaches in American intelligence history, to demonstrate that even the most carefully constructed operations can collapse in seconds when confronted with the unpredictable chaos of human reality. The museum's overhead lights hum quietly. The camera waits in its case. And outside, in the parking lot of Fort Meade, where Sandra Meeks once watched Martin Kovac walk away into the darkness, new analysts arrive for the night shift, carrying their security badges, their briefcases, their secrets. The work continues. The vigilance never stops. The war that's never officially declared goes on.